Welcome to another video. This is Raw Deal. This is Yakov, and today I would like to speak with you about two different techniques people often use for self-development. And in this video, we'll compare and contrast these techniques, but more than anything, we'll really find one interesting similarity between them. It will help if you're familiar with a technique called Vipassana meditation. In particular, I am going to be describing the Vipassana in the Goenka tradition. I think it's the most commonly found thing in the West when it comes to Vipassana, right? I know when people say the word Vipassana, everybody tends to think different things, but this is really what we'll be discussing, right? This is not some judgment of the technique or any other techniques. That's just what I'm familiar with. That's why I had some ideas because I'm also practicing yoga, which will be another technique in this conversation, right? And I'll show you some interesting similarities that I found between the two. So I'm not going to describe the Vipassana technique in whole detail. There are probably other videos for that, perhaps even on this channel. Or, you know, if you're so curious, you can also go take a 10-day course. It could be an interesting experience, right? But in short, I will just say the Vipassana technique is a scanning technique. So we scan the body from the top of the head to the tips of the toes and back, and we pay attention to the sensations that arise as we go along the way on the body. And the key point of the technique is to do that equanimously, right? So if you've ever attended a 10-day course, a Goenka course, you probably remember that you hear this word equanimity, equanimous over and over again, because it seems that people want to drill it and instill it in your head, because you should be equanimous as you observe these sensations. What that means, if a sensation is pleasant, right, you don't want to be trying to cling to it, trying to get more of it. If the sensation is unpleasant, perhaps it's some itching or pain, you don't want to try to avert it, right? You don't want to develop any aversion, so you still equanimously, calmly observe it as a third party and not try to get rid of it. So that's roughly the idea. And we just keep doing it up and down the body, back and forth, right? And that's basically the technique. And the technique, or its understanding, or its theoretical underpinnings, say that by doing so, by being conscious and consciously observing these sensations, we actually get rid of something called samskaras, which is a Buddhist and also in yoga tradition is about the same term, which basically means some impressions on our mind, which also manifest in the body, because mind and body is a phenomenon that's inseparable, it's indelible, basically it's a complex, right? And what manifests itself in the mind must manifest itself in the body. And in this particular technique, we're using the body and watching it as the gateway into this whole complex, right? So there might be a separate video about that. So that's how we do it, and by watching it, we essentially evaporate it. So our mind, our consciousness is like a laser. We're shining at some puddle, we're heating it up. If we don't do it from the first time over and over again, the more we do it, some particular samskara might get less, until eventually it's just gone. And the person might notice that in the same situation, they just act completely differently, right? And they don't know when it happened, because it just seems suddenly some particular thing does not bother them, right? For instance, I will just give you a quick experience. You know, I used to have a big aversion to insects. About halfway through my first Vipassana course, I noticed that there were a bunch of bees and wasps flying around, and they didn't bother me anymore. So it was a wonderful experience, because it showed me halfway through the course that the technique actually works. I think halfway through the course puts us at about 2 days with Vipassana, because first 3 days you essentially just do preparation by increasing your concentration, your sensitivity. So in 2 days, it got rid of my pretty big aversion, pretty big psychological problem. So that's when I knew this thing was for real, and I was really taking it seriously from then on. So it's just a quick example. So that's roughly how Vipassana works. I don't claim that it's any kind of thorough explanation, but for our purposes, this will suffice. So let's now move on to the yoga part. Particularly, we mean Hatha yoga. Hatha yoga, if you're not familiar, it's physical exercises called asanas and pranayama, which is the breathing exercises. But we are specifically interested in the physical exercises, right? We're not going to touch the breathing part for now. So many people are confused because when they start doing yoga, they think, okay, so we take and we bend our leg and we try to stretch ourselves. So that's the whole point, right? But that's actually not correct. One reason why it's not correct, well, first of all, even stretching must be done correctly because you must apply proper level of discomfort to yourself, right? There must be discomfort because otherwise, why would we be doing it? We must experience austerity. So that's an important part. As you will notice, that'll have a parallel in the Vipassana world, right? Our austerity in yoga, in Hatha yoga, is actually corresponding to the unpleasant sensation that might arise in Vipassana. So that's the thing we're going to be trying to be equanimous to, right? So, but people don't know about it. So, somebody might tell them, okay, when you do this asana, just follow your breath, which is pretty good. But I think it still somewhat misses the point, right? So you follow the breath, okay. Or they'll get an instruction like stay in your body, which is also pretty good, but it's somewhat ambiguous and confusing. What does that even mean, right? Stay in your body, okay. So roughly that means I'm going to be paying attention to some sensations, right? From my experience in doing Hatha yoga and also my experience with Vipassana and just other meditations, so I've also done Zazen meditation, which is a whole other thing. I'm not trying to bring it into this conversation, but really I think the best, if you will, instruction for doing Hatha yoga on where to put your attention is to put your attention where the tension or the pain or sensations are created by that particular asana. For example, if we're doing something like Hasta Parangushtasana, right? Which is you take standing body, you bend in your hips and try to reach with your, say, fingers, grab your big toes, and you basically try to go into this fold, right? Or maybe you stick your palms under your feet. That's another variation of that. That's very similar. So the idea is that this pose will stretch the back part of your legs, right? And perhaps the hip joints as well. So then obviously it should create some sensations in those areas. Those sensations will be unpleasant, right? Maybe it's pleasant for somebody, I don't know, it's certainly possible. But for most people, they will probably have an aversion to these kinds of painful sensations, right? So these people will try to avert. However, in line and very similarly to the Vipassana technique, to get the proper yogic work done, which means it's the work that will cleanse the psyche, that will start eliminating these samskaras or imprints on the mind, and in particular on the mind-body complex, because as we already mentioned, these two are one. We're just using the body to access this complex, because for most people, and I'll try to make a separate video for it, because both Vipassana and I think Hatha yoga use the root via the body, but it's certainly possible to go directly to the mind. It's just much more difficult. I think the mind is a much more elusive, sly and deceiving thing. So for most people, it's a lot harder to observe the mind directly. So they have to use, I don't want to call it a crutch, but they have to use this technique or tool, or, suppose you're climbing a mountain, there's a way to climb, say, an Everest that's technically easier, right? So most people, or people with less preparation, or maybe people with some conditions, they might use that. But maybe there is a challenging road that perhaps is a shorter distance, but it takes a lot of skill, a lot of preparation, a lot of ability as almost athleticism, right? So whatever that is in meditation. So maybe it's some experience from past lives of using some particular technique over and over again, right? But for example, in my opinion, Zazen from Zen tradition is something like that, where they go directly for the mind, right? Whereas in yoga, you first do the body, then pranayama, and then you only start doing meditation, assuming you already worked a lot of that off, a lot of these problems from the body part. So we do that, and we watch these sensations equanimously, and I think that's the best instruction, because that's the way the actual yogic work is going to be done. If the person is not watching the sensations caused by the asana or created by the asana, by the pose, right? Say their mind is floating out somewhere, they're thinking, what they're going to eat, how their day has been or will be going, So then the sensation is still there, it's being created. However, it's now we are still unconscious of it. And basically what we're doing, we're essentially replanting those seeds, right? So in the Goenka tradition, I think he uses this analogy of a banyan tree where you take one seed and then it basically spawns and then more seeds and more seeds. So we're essentially multiplying our problems if we are unconscious of something because we can be reacting. In this case, we're not reacting, but if we're not conscious of something, then there is a great possibility that we're creating problems. So that's why I think even in an asana, it's the best thing to do is to actually draw your attention to the actual sensations created by the asana. And I'm certainly not alone in this particular tradition. I know some other in this particular view. I know some other yogis who look at it the same way. I'm very much aware of the concept called drishti, which means just a point of focus, right? And oftentimes you're doing some asana, people will tell you, oh, like look at the tip of your palm, or like look at your toes or something like that. You know, perhaps that's for the view, maybe just to help you align the body, because drishti could be separated as the actual visual thing where you're looking, that helps you align the body properly, right? Because where our head goes, our body is going to go. So if you're looking down, you're going to slouch. If you're looking up, your body is going to straighten up. So my opinion, call it a crazy opinion, perhaps, but that this drishti that we're using, you know, look here, look there on the actual body, toe, or, you know, along your palm somewhere, this drishti is actually for helping us align the body properly. So the drishti, or the point of attention of our mind, as I'm trying to argue here, or just say this is my opinion, should be where the sensations caused by the asana are. That's really the way to actually unravel and start uncovering those problems from the mind-body complex, and that's how the mind and body will get clean. And so as it basically relaxes, it will eliminate all these problems. And I noticed, I certainly didn't measure this, but if we do it that way, I noticed that the most efficient and optimal work gets done when one does it this way. If one is unconscious of these sensations, I noticed that the speed at which the relaxation, the loosening of these body parts, the flexibility at which it comes, it slows down. So if you don't pay attention, say you're looking at the breath instead of those particular sensations, then I noticed that you might not get the results as quickly, right? But when you start paying attention to those particular parts, then the speed picks up again. So that's been my subjective experience. So that's all that I have. I think these techniques are very interestingly similar. They try to work with this mind-body complex in what turns out to be very similar ways. But at first glance, these techniques look completely different. And one may have never thought that they actually have a lot in common. So that's the video. This is channel Raw Deal. Come back for more videos, subscribe. This is Yakov. See you soon.